Fire alone will save the clan. And Firestar saved me. Which cat saved you? Hi and welcome back to my channel. It's me, Lauren, filmmaker extraordinaire, and today we're talking about warrior cats because I have been obsessed with the series since I was a kid, and I literally still love them so much. Them being the books, the cats, the series, whatever. I own almost all the series. Obviously, I put all the books behind me, and then I have a ton more books over here because they literally don't fit. There are so many books between the regular series, the super editions, the graphic novels, the manga, the super, like the ultimate guides. I already said the super editions. Literally so many books. I love them so much. And I wanted to do a video that is sort of lighter on the surface, but I think also attacks a lot of the debate about what kids are able to digest, should be privy to, and what kind of material and topics that children and teenagers, etc. can understand. And I really think the Warrior Cat series accomplishes this really well. And I also just wanted an excuse to talk about my loves, my icons, my kings and queens, the warriors. Meow. My mom can attest, and maybe she will in the comments, but every time a new book was published, I literally would reread the whole series in chronological order because I was that crazy and I wanted to have like everything as up to date as possible. And like I would even notice if Erin Hunter, who is like an amalgamation of different authors, would make like a mistake. For example, when they released this ultimate guide, they said that Crooked Star, like he caught a trout with a crooked jaw, and that's what like they decided to make him deputy, and he actually caught a squirrel with a crooked jaw, which you can read about in Crooked Star's Promise. So that kind of lovely error I would like, just a casual little obsession. So please enjoy this chaotic video, and major warning, spoilers. So many spoilers ahead. The spoilers don't go to like the series that's like currently being written, and like the bulk of what my examples will be, I would say through, okay, major spoiler, through like the death of Firestar. Like I do own the Vision of Shadows and the Broken Code series. I don't actually own the one that came out after the Broken Code yet. Maybe I will acquire. But I would say like the bulk of my examples that I'll be referencing will be, I would say like the more meat and potatoes of the series for someone who would have started reading as a kid and may have stopped like when they went to college. I say may have because I read some books definitely into college, like some of the last ones that came out. But I would guess that like most people probably like started doing other things in their lives. Just not me, apparently. I have a couple notes just to like keep me sort of on track, but I may just go like totally off kilter, right? So we'll see what happens. If say you have no clue what I'm talking about, what is like the basic concept of warrior cats, you might ask? Well, it's a book series about cats who live in the wild. They are warriors and they live in clans, and that's like a very basic premise, right? But it's really more about other things, which I will get into later. But yeah, on the basic surface, we have different clans. Initially, it's Thunder Clan, Wind Clan, River Clan, and Shadow Clan, and then Star Clan, who's like their kind of heaven. As the series kind of progresses, we're also introduced to Sky Clan, we're introduced to the Tribe of Rushing Water, we're introduced to like kind of different groups of cats and different time periods, and the Dark Forest, who would be like the hell equivalent if Star Clan's the heaven equivalent. So as the series progresses, like we're introduced to more things, but initially we just have the basic 4 clans, and the origin story for those clans starts like more of a mythos with like 4 cats, thunder, river, wind, and shadow like meet. And then later on they actually have a whole origin, which is insane actually, which is in this series. And it's a crazy how they like start at the lake, go to the mountains, move to the forest in this journey. And it's crazy because in the kind of chronological series, before this point, we start at the forest, they travel through the mountains and end up at the lake. So it's really like insane, the kind of full circle moments that are really happening in the whole entirety of the series. But most of like the first 6 books start at the forest, and then we move on the journey to the lake, and everything else in the main series takes place at the lake. Importantly, also, they live by the warrior code, which you could say is sort of like their 10 commandments, whatever, or if you don't want to be religious, their constitution, like they have rules that they abide by, such as on the full moon, there's a truce and they all meet to discuss the comings and goings of their clans. They kind of mingle and then they go back their separate ways. They are supposed to, stick to their clan. Warriors eat last, so they make sure, like, once they've hunted the queens, who are like the nursing mothers, the elders, the kids, they all get fed first before the warriors would eat, that kind of thing. Basically just like, I would say it's like an honor code, an ethical code. Medicine cats can travel sort of on the border and they should not be hurt by any of the other warriors because the medicine cat could be doing an important mission, that kind of thing. So I love it, okay? We love. Another thing to understand about how the series is set up is each sort of there's a whole series, but it's almost like by season, and each season is 6 books. The first season was just really about Firestar and it's told from his point of view pretty much only. Then in the second sort of season, we have a couple different perspectives, and then I would say like kind of each season afterwards, like more cats are sort of brought into the mix, but they're all still like kind of a story that's generally contained in that season, and then they all work together in the whole series. Then there's the super editions, which are like kind of deep dives into one specific kind of cat or like a moment in that cat's life. And the super editions, if you can kind of see in the back, there's like these kind of bigger books. And I think some of the super editions are honestly like some of the best books in the series, but you really, really only appreciate them, obviously, if you've read the whole series and like understand that cat. And then when you get to see like their background, it's like, whoa. For example, if you say haven't read the books and for some reason want to, even though I've spoiled stuff for you, then I would recommend reading the series in the order the books were published first, because otherwise there'll be kind of some spoilers, and then you can really appreciate the like individual deep dives. They recently just started doing these graphic novels, which are amazing and fun. Again, I would read the regular books first. They also did like these like manga books. And I love the Tiger Star and Sasha manga books. I think Sasha's one of the most interesting characters in the whole of the like Warriors cinematic universe, as we could say. So it's just like an incredible world, so in depth. I'm obsessed, you're obsessed, we're all obsessed. And it would honestly take me like a decade, it feels like, to actually explain the entire plot chronologically. So that's not actually the focus of this video. If you would want that, if you want a crazy deep dive, let me know in the comments. And if this video somehow does really well, maybe I will do that. So what this video is really about is we talked about the surface level of what Warriors, but I want to now talk about what I think Warriors is really about. And again, as I kind of said earlier, how it's really an incredible way to tell children about really important, serious topics in a way that's digestible, maybe a little confusing, but like explained through the books. And you don't even really realize like what you're reading about initially, which I think is like the really powerful tool that Warriors has, because you're reading about cats. But ultimately you realize you're really reading about like people. It could be anybody, any type of person who are experiencing these things, aside from the fact that like people aren't cats. But if we go beyond that level, it's really human stories that we're witnessing and reading through the kind of disguise of cats. So that's what I want to talk about. And I'm going to list basically a ton of things, give some examples. They're not going to be in any particular order or anything like that. It's just kind of the order that I was thinking about them when I was writing the notes down. And if there's anything that I missed that you're like, oh my God, Lauren, you have to talk about this, please let me know in the comments, or if your own opinions. Trust me, I would love to have a Warrior Cats dialogue with anyone and everyone, okay? Because no one else in my family really cares about Warrior Cats. Like, they'll listen to me talk about it, but I would love, 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 love to have like a real dialogue with you guys, other Psycho fans. So without further ado, let the prophecies begin, baby. This might be obvious, but war comes up in the Warrior Cats. And I think it's brought up more in terms of like battles or border skirmishes, because all the cats, they have clans, and the clans have certain boundaries. And like in the forest, for example, there are these rocks called Sunning Rocks, which are often contested between River Clan and Thunder Clan because it's on their border and each clan wants those rocks. So for example, there could be like battles over that area, and maybe some clans get it and then like they're kind of turned around. There aren't that many, I would say, like huge battles and wars, especially like with regular cats. But when we have like certain evil cats, like Scourge, Tiger Star, later when we like Tiger Star returns and then he's dead, but his like skull returns at the Dark Forest. Those are really big battles. And that's when there's a lot of death. When there's like these huge like multi-clan insane mega fight wars, the cats die or they get seriously wounded. And it's sad. My face may not look sad, but it is sad. And it's kind of startling, I think, when like maybe as a kid, I don't know you guys, but like when I was a kid, most of the books I read, like good characters really didn't die very much when I was like just kind of starting my little reading journey, versus in Warrior Cats, good cats did die. I mean, relatively early on, Spotted Leaf, who's a medicine cat, is murdered brutally. And she's like this, described as like this really beautiful soul of a cat, also beautiful, but like really nice, very considerate, very caring. And she's murdered. She's killed. Not even in like a crazy battle because she's a medicine cat. Like there was like an attack on the ThunderClan camp and she's killed. And that's like, whoa, Spotted Leaf's dead. Like this was crazy to me. And there were other cats who died, but like before that, but I hadn't really liked them that much in the sense of like Firepaw at the time really liked Spotted Leaf. So we spent a lot of time kind of talking about her, hence why I was like, whoa, more impacted. And that's just the first of many, many cats to die by like bloodshed in battle. For me, I really realized like, wow, like they're fighting also one over the same, for example, when it's Sunning Rocks again, they're fighting over the same rocks over and over, right? Like it's like a kind of a continuous fight. It's not really accomplishing anything. Like maybe RiverClan has the rocks for a bit and then ThunderClan has it. But it's the same fight over and over again, really making like no progress. And I think we can think about this as kind of wars that are constantly happening, maybe in the Middle East. And it feels like overall progress isn't really being made. It's just like this constant battle. And as a kid, of course, you don't make that connection right away. But that's the power of Warrior Cats. The rest of them that I'm going to mention, I think, start to be a little less on the nose because they're not in the name of the series. But nonetheless, they are maybe more important or more poignant or whatever, depending on who you are and like what you're into. Alongside like the war and death from war, there's also just death in general in the Warrior Cats. And you also are like introduced to these cats, which I think makes the deaths like can be more shocking. For example, let me just grab Squirrel Flight's Hope, for example, because it's right near the ground. In the beginning of the books, they go through the allegiances and they talk about like who each cat is, what their role is in each clan. For example, Daisy, cream long-furred cat from the horse place. They have like the elders, they'll say who is an apprentice, etc. for all the clans. And then they have like the map as well. I should have shown the map. So this is like the lake by this time. And we can see that Star Clan, Wind Clan, River Clan, they're all here and they all have their area. And then something else I like about Warriors is they then show like two-leg or human view. Oh yeah, I should have mentioned this. Humans are two legs in this world. And if you're a house cat, you're called a kitty pet. Sorry, I forgot that like not everyone can know things about this. Watch there be like lots of random tangents like this as the video progresses. But basically, yeah, so we're introduced to all the cats in some form or fashion, even if it's just like their name, what they look like, and kind of their role. But usually also, especially if it's the clan that cat or that book is kind of focusing on, which is most of the time ThunderClan. Every now and then we'll talk about like Shadow Clan or whatever, but most of the time we care most about ThunderClan because that's Firestar went to ThunderClan. And it's really kind of like his lineage that we then like learn about and travel like through the world with. We like know these cats and then they die maybe in battle, maybe by a sickness. There's white cough, green cough, like which are the big coughing diseases. And that's always sad. Maybe the cats die giving birth to kits. Or there's death, some by snake bite. And there's just like a lot of like death that happens. And then of course it's still old age. All the elders, maybe they just don't wake up. And it's still sad though. And there's like this importance on death and what that means. They also talk about like death by drowning. 2 different cats drown, which is like painful. Though they're kind of described differently. Flametail drowns and he sort of is at peace at the end of the drowning, but then he gets salty in StarClan and they have to like resolve that with like the StarClan cats communicating to the medicine cats because even though he knows what happened, he like doesn't want to reveal the truth. Versus like we have Fallen Leaves, who's like an ancient cat who he drowns in the tunnels trying to prove himself. And we learn from like that you need to be respectful of the elements. And if they tell you, you can't do this right now, like you have to wait for it to be more safe, and you're kind of arrogant and you don't wait, like there are repercussions to that. Even in the first book, death is very seriously mentioned as the deputy at the time, Redtail. He's killed, you think it's like a border skirmish, but later learn he was murdered by Tiger Claw, who then became Tiger Star. Anyways, and the cats kind of sit like vigil, which is respecting the dead before he's buried. And that's brought up very soon into the series. So the importance of death and its like impact, but also the understanding in the warrior cats world that if you're a good cat, you know, you'll go to Star Clan, and it's a place where like your belly will always be full, which is, I think, a very wholesome, very sweet way to think about like contentedness, peace, and happiness. And that you'll see them again when you go to Star Clan. Again, like the heaven thing. But there's an importance on death, the physical life, and then like the next place. Which, you know, as a kid, if you're religious, like I am religious, so I do believe in heaven, I'm Catholic. Maybe you're not religious, that could be like a really interesting way to think about death. I realized the next thing I wrote was disability and disfigurement, and I feel like I'm just like going through like insurance. But disability and disfigurement are also topics that are brought up recurringly in the Warrior Cat series, and I love this because I really feel like there aren't too many other like book series for kids that really like emphasize disability. I mean, you could think about like Harry Potter, who wears glasses. Like that is obviously like you need to see. Or like PETA in the Hunger Games loses a leg, but not in the movies. They cut that part of the movies, right? So I just really love the amount and variety of the different cats that experience things. As far as like kind of main cats go, we have one of my favorite cats in the whole series, Jay Feather. He's blind, and this is like a really big deal for him because he wants to be a warrior. Like his family, like his siblings, he wants to be a warrior, and he can't. Like he tries to be a warrior, but he can't keep up in the like training battles. He gets confused, and he realizes like he ends up becoming a medicine cat where he can utilize the skills he does have, as he has very sharp other senses, but he can't see. And I love him for many reasons. For one, he's like a really sarcastic cat. Like one of my favorite lines of his is, "Great, let's put all the useless cats together and hope a tree falls on them." I just think he's iconic for that. But it really shows that, you know, if you're born different, because he was just born that way, then he still ended up having a very fulfilling life. He had great purpose, he made connections, he did a lot of things, but he couldn't follow his original dreams. And I just think that's really just important, especially for me at this time. I have some like mental health struggles, but I don't have, for now, any like more major disabilities. And I think it can be really easy for me as someone who kind of goes about the world easily. Like I currently have all my senses, I can walk, etc., to kind of have this perspective of an entity who doesn't. I mean, now I think I have empathy and understanding as an adult, but as a kid, maybe you don't until you're like reading these books or characters and you're in the mind of a character who is dealing with those struggles. So I think it's really powerful and impactful for young people to have this kind of introduction. We also have cats who things happen to them versus how they were born. And that a great example would be Briarlight. She does actually have a tree fall on her as she's protecting one of some of the elders, which is also then a point because some of the elders are like, oh, I wish she hadn't done that. Like I could have died, I've already lived, and now her back legs are like smushed. And they thought she was going to die, but you know, she had internal motivation, and Jay Feather actually also believes in her. And she ends up kind of like walking just with her front paw, and then she like kind of drags herself around the camp, and she still finds a place for herself. But it's really tough. Like she gets sick easier. Her kind of path that she wanted gets crushed. I mean, way back in the day, you know, we had Cinderpelt, and she wanted to be a warrior, but then she got hit by a car, and then she had a limp. So she didn't die. She didn't have like full crushing, but she had to change paths. She had to become a medicine cat, which was not the path that she wanted either. So we have these things that are out of our control. Trees, cars, I mean, sometimes those are out of our control as humans, but just in general, and they change the way our story's going to go. We also have Brightheart, who she got horribly disfigured from a dog fight, that she still lived, but we see like the power of personality love because Cloudpaw, who then becomes Cloudtail, he loved her, and he loved her regardless. It didn't matter that now she was no longer like this pretty cat. He still loved her. They still were a couple. They still had kids together. And it was like a really heartwarming thing also in the series because at that point, Cloud Paw still, he's kind of a spoiled brat of a kit. He had been sort of like brought into the clan. He was Firestar's sister. Oh my god, I didn't even explain Firestar. Oh my god. Firestar is a kitty pet named Rusty at the beginning of the series, and he is drawn to the woods, and there's a prophecy that fire will save the clan, and the cats ultimately realize that Rusty, who becomes Firepaw, Fireheart, ultimately Firestar, is that fire who saves the clan. I can't believe I didn't say that. I just was like, everyone knows this. But anyways, yeah, so he's not technically like lineage of the clans. My canon idea, and like part of it's not canon, is that Tallstar also, a side note, is the leader of Wind Clan, and he really likes Firestar, and we're not really sure why initially, but I think it's pretty much confirmed in Tallstar's revenge. Yeah, Tallstar's revenge, that his best guy friend, Firestar is one of his kids, actually. And I also think that Scourge, who is like this really evil little cat who like puts nails like on his nail, he puts like teeth on his nails and stuff, is actually Firestar's relative as well. Cloudpaw initially is really spoiled, kind of bratty, and then this kind of shows that he does also have like love and care, and he's more than just like this little bratty kid. So it's just a really powerful moment. Also, we have Snowkit, who he's deaf. Snowkit's actually a really sad story because he's deaf, and because of that, he doesn't hear when a hawk is coming, and he ends up being taken and presumably eaten by a hawk, which is really sad because like he's literally like a very young child who's just like taken, and because he's deaf, he can't hear, and even though they're like, oh my god, get out of the way, he doesn't understand. And that's like a very brief kind of scene in the series, but it really stuck with me. And then later on, when their cats are traveling, they're also like eagles and hawks are kind of in the area when they're traveling. And it just, I think, goes to show like how delicate like children are, and how things that a bigger person, you know, or a full-grown cat in the series, like it wouldn't be a big deal. To the kids, it is a huge deal. And I think we just have to remember as people that like children are precious, and we shouldn't be, in this case, maybe bombing them in Gaza and giving them no humanitarian aid because they didn't do anything. They're just living their lives, like doing their best. To stick with the maybe like depressing nature, there's also being like driven out of your home is addressed, because the reason that the cats in like kind of the original like pushing forward series go from the forest to the lake is because humans are destroying the forest to build more houses, which I think as people we can all know some area that was maybe wilderness and now they're building luxury apartments or something. And this is a topic that's brought up in the Warrior Cat series with deforestation and their habitats being lost, their home being lost, the food is going away because all the other like animals that they eat, mice, squirrels, voles, whatever, like they're leaving, and then the cats have to find a new home. So not only are they like forced out of their home, but then they also have to immigrate, right? They have to find they have to go to a new place, rebuild from kind of, you know, ground zero. And as a kid, for me, that was the first time I really thought about that. I think being your home being like physically destroyed, like on a huge scale. And I think that kind of reading that alongside for me, like Hurricane Sandy, which was a big thing when I was in middle school, and the destruction of that kind of was connecting these dots for me growing up, that wow, some people's homes are destroyed and they like kind of lose everything. And I feel very grateful that that hasn't happened to my childhood home where I'm currently sitting, but it happens to a lot of people. And even maybe your house doesn't get fully destroyed, but like I've now moved several times to college, to LA, now back to New Jersey, and it's really emotionally painful to move, to pack up your belongings, and it's tiring, it's draining, and it's just really interesting, I think, to read about it from like the cat's perspective. The Warriors, I think, also does a really good job of addressing prejudice, stereotypes, biases, because there's the Warrior Cats, and they all have like their different stereotypical ideas of what the other clans are sort of like. Shadow Clan, maybe they're like sneakier. Thunder Clan, they're more arrogant. Wind Clan, they kind of like stick to themselves. River Clan, they're kind of wealthy vibes and like pretty. They like decorate their clan with pretty pebbles and stuff. So the cats have different kind of ideas of like who the different clans are just from kind of like, right, these like surface level ideas of the different cats. And then aside from that, loners, who are cats that are not kitty pets, but they're also not in the clans. They're kind of just like solo cats. They're looked down upon for the most part. Kitty pets are looked down upon for being lazy. There's a couple of cats like Barley, who's a barn cat, and then Ravenpaw ultimately ends up living with Barley. And Barley kind of has a slightly higher level status than like a typical loner, but he's still not a clan cat. Although we do see in the series that, he's a really great cat. He really helps out the cats. And I think this is a good point to show that like he's helping the clans. He doesn't have to. He doesn't have their allegiances. He doesn't necessarily have this code that he follows. Although I do think that at the end it's nice that like he still believes in StarClan, so he'll go to StarClan too, which is great. But I like that that's kind of a way to show like maybe the cats who don't fit into the mold, and obviously Firestar starts as a kitty pet and he becomes like this major hero cat, that maybe our prejudices are wrong. Like maybe we have an understanding about someone who's different from us, and that understanding could be wrong. And we should take a step back maybe from our initial judgments and actually try to get to know other people and see who they are for them, not for this like idea of who they are, which I think is really, really powerful. And I love the warrior cats for that. For another example of it's about this, but it's really about this. It's forbidden in the warrior cats to have mates or kits with cats from other clans. Every now and then someone will join another clan, and that's also hush hush, really not talked about because it's looked down upon to like convert. And I would say that's a conversion idea of religion. However, when we're not talking about them kind of joining another clan, I would say it's not conversion. It's not about religion at that point, and it's actually like kind of a race allegory, because then it becomes like an interracial couple, which I think is something that's more poignant, maybe not so much today in more liberal areas, but there are still places, I think, where it's kind of looked on with some kind of not great approval in more conservative places and places where there are still more racist, like more outwardly racist people, which is not good, obviously. And I think the Warrior Cat series does a really good job of highlighting that these cats who fall in love with cats from other clans, there's obviously Blue Star and Oakheart, there's Silverstream and Graystripe. We understand that these cats, they love each other. And there's like kind of earlier series. There are cats later, like Dovewing and Tigerheart. I think that's more of a conversion story, but there's also Leafpool and Crowfeather, which is even more complicated because she's also a medicine cat. And medicine cats, even within their own clan, aren't supposed to have children or fall in love. That's kind of another like religious moment. They're sort of like priests. Like they're supposed to be like the main focus with Star Clan and Faith. They're not supposed to have worldly connections the same way. That happens a couple times. Like Yellowfang is a medicine cat who falls in love. Though she did start as a warrior, to be fair. She's kind of forced into medicine catness. But anyways, back to the interracial thing. And we see how hard it is for these cats because Blue Star and Oakheart, like they really love each other, but they end up not being together. Ultimately, Oakheart is killed in battle, and then Blue Star has to give away the children to River Clan, where Oakheart is from, because she's a Thunder Clan cat, and she has to give away her children and pretend that they died because she can't tell her clan what really happened, what the real truth is, which is really painful. And it's painful to read. It was like made me cry when I first read it. And I think it can go to show how even in society that's supposed to be, have this code and people supposed to be taken care of, the cats supposed to be taken care of, kids are honored. There's still a lot of stigma and judgment, and you can't just like do things that your heart tells you because you'll be shunned or not accepted. You may not be exiled, but your whole life will change and they'll look at you differently. And then we have Graystripe and Silverstream, and that's also really sad because Silverstream ends up dying in childbirth, which is like a really graphic, horrible scene. And it's awful. And Graystripe actually thinks that the kits died as well, but they didn't. And they end up having some trauma of like moving a lot as children because they are first taken into ThunderClan with Graystripe. But the leader of River Clan, Crooked Star, Silverstream was his daughter, and he wants her children in River Clan, and Graystripe ends up going with them to be still with their father and be together, and that's like a whole thing. And then of course he ends up being kicked out of River Clan back to ThunderClan because his loyalty is still with ThunderClan. It's a whole thing, but it's a lot of pain and judgment which I think is something that we can take into consideration and be like, well, we shouldn't be judging these cats necessarily. And we shouldn't be judging people, more importantly, for falling in love with each other regardless of like race or religion or whatever kind of more visible differences, because that doesn't really matter. Like, it's about what's inside that counts. This next one, kind of sticking with relationships, could be a little more contentious depending on who you view. Well, depending on who you ask, I would say I think there are two maybe queer relationships that we can look at in the Warrior Cat series, and they're kind of less explicitly stated, and they might just be seen as, oh, they're just really good friends. You know, they were roommates. And that would be Tallstar and Jake, who I sort of alluded to earlier, and Barley and Ravenpaw. Now, Barley and Ravenpaw, I think they're more seen like they could just be like little besties, but like they're very, very close. Ravenpaw ends up having to flee ThunderClan because he knows that Tiger Star is the one who killed Redtail. He knows that Redtail didn't die by a RiverClan cat. So that's not great. He's kind of attacked, patrolled, so everyone ends up fleeing to save his life, basically. And he and Barley, the barn cat, like they really get along. They live together. And there's a scene when, you know, Barley thinks Ravenpaw is going to leave with the cats and he's really devastated. But Ravenpaw's like, no, my place is here with you. And they end up actually having a whole, like manga thing, similar vibes. And Ravenpaw's like, no, Barley, you and I are the team. And to me, there's some vibes there. And also Tallstar and Jake. Tallstar notably like doesn't have any romantic interest in any female cats like ever. And he does really bond with Jake. And then, of course, he's really very caring and very invested in Firestar, who, you know, we kind of learn is actually Jake's son. So I think there's some vibes there too, personally. But I am also queer myself, so I could be reading into that one a bit more than the other ones. But I still wanted to mention it. Along with relationships, I'm also just talking about there are also like second marriages, I think, brought up. The biggest one would be with Graystripe. He's the one who lost Silverstream when she gave birth. And many moons later, that's kind of how they talk about it. Like his kits are fully grown. Stormfur and Feathertail, fully grown cats by this point, really. And Graystripe ends up getting kind of kidnapped when the forest is being destroyed and taken to become a kitty pet because like the humans are like, oh no, these poor feral cats, they need homes, let's give them to people. He ends up escaping ultimately and coming back to the clans, but while he's over there, he meets Millie, and like they ultimately fall in love, and he ends up, you know, him and Millie come back and they become a couple. And I, as a kid, when I first read this, I did not like Millie. I was like, ew, Millie. Graystripe loves Silverstream. But they actually, in the manga, because there was like a manga about their relationship, more specifically, because otherwise like kind of Graystripe just shows up with Millie later in the books, but in the manga we see, and there's actually a scene where Graystripe has a dream where he's talking to Silverstream and StarClan, and he's like, I don't understand, like, I love you, I'm very conflicted how I feel about Millie. And she's basically like, you still do love me, like, you loving someone else now that I'm gone doesn't take away your love for me. As a kid reading the books, I was like, whoa, this is crazy, because I had never really thought about that. Just because someone might be gone, like, you don't love them less, just because now you may also love somebody else. And obviously there's also lots of second marriages that happen with divorce or being separated, whatever. It's not like someone necessarily has to die, but that was like kind of the first moment that it really hit me reading about it. And then I think it made it sort of easier later in the series. They have a cat who, Spiderleg and Daisy, they have kits, but it doesn't really work out between them and they kind of go their separate ways. And that's another, I think, a great example of like, oh, another kind of different type of love story. Like Spiderleg also kind of has deadbeat dad vibes, which she gets kind of like given a verbal talking to about that, which I thought was amazing. Being like, just because things didn't work out with your wife, you have to be there for the kid. And I thought that was iconic. But we also have, oh my God, he was like the annoying one. Barry Nose. I think that's his name is Barry Nose. He like kind of loves Honeyfur, but then Honeyfur gets killed by a snake bite, and then he ends up falling in love with her sister, which is kind of dramatic. Oh, why am I blanking on her name? Whatever. Anyways, whatever her name is, they end up becoming a couple. And that's, again, like another example of like, the relationship's not, it's not like that was fake, like that emotion was fake. Or Crowfeather, he loves Feathertail. He ends up also falling in love with Leafpool over time. like that doesn't take away from the emotions you had that initial relationship, which is the point I was trying to get across. The next note I have kind of feels random, but it has to do with religion. And this is really about what's like StarClan and the impact on the clan's lives. So StarClan, as I mentioned, that's kind of the idea of heaven. If you're a good cat, you follow the code, you go to StarClan when you die, and initially you kind of get the sense that you're there forever. However, like later as the lore gets developed, you kind of learn that some of the cats who are really old sort of stick around as they kind of like very faint memories of cats who just are barely there because the cats remember them a lot. Otherwise, there's cats who are much, much older who kind of just like slip away. But it's described as a very peaceful thing. It's not like, oh, they've been forgotten, LOL. It's more like they lived a long time. Now they've been at peace for a long time and they're ready to just like rest eternally, which I think was very beautiful. And it kind of reminds me of like The Good Place now that I'm thinking about it, where like you're dead and you can like kind of do some more stuff. And when you're ready at the end, like you can just kind of end. And that's not what I personally believe. I believe in heaven and then be with God for eternity, but I do kind of like how the lore like expands on this idea. There's also the Dark Forest, which again is like the hell equivalent, and where if all the cats are happy in StarClan, the cats are not happy in the Dark Forest. There is sort of this like drama bit where like later when the warriors are struggling in the real world, StarClan starts to struggle as like a reflection of like the code and the cats who are struggling, which is an interesting concept and kind of shows how like the faith, like these are they're interlocked, and the StarClan is only like strong if the warrior code is strong because they're connected like that, which I think is really interesting. StarClan also has the power to give leaders 9 lives, which I think is like such an iconic slay of Erin Hunter to be like, we're gonna fit in the cats have 9 lives thing somewhere, and we're gonna do it with the leaders, and that's so that basically leaders are more willing to take risks and they don't feel like they need to hide during a battle. Like they should be on the front lines because they have a few more lives that they could risk losing. And I just think that's like a really cool like storytelling element. It's still only 9 lives. And for like Tiger Star, for example, when he gets killed by Scourge, ultimately Scourge is like the super devil cat, like the crazy, like extra teeth and claws on his claws. It's such a deep wound, they can't heal him. And he actually dies like 9 times like in a row. And that's actually described as like a really horrific scene as well that like none of the cats really wanted or expected. So that's like another thing that StarClan has that power for. They communicate with mostly the medicine cats, sometimes the leaders, and they typically go to the moonstone at the forest, and then the moon pool at the lake, and they touch the stone or touch the water, and then that's like a great spot to communicate. And we can think of this as maybe like going to church, going to a chapel to pray somewhere specific, going to a mosque, wherever your like place of connecting to God is. But they can also come to you like wherever, whenever. It's just like kind of easier maybe to commune with them at these specific places. And for SkyClan, when they're still like the Gorge, when they had gotten kicked out, that's like a whole other thing actually I forgot to mention. Like much earlier, they had to add to the lore that when we go back to like deforestation, the initial houses that were built, SkyClan gets kicked out, and they end up just being like kicked out, booted out, exiled from the area. And then the warrior clans, the remaining ones, ultimately have to kind of like atone for this, and Firestar kind of brings that clan back, and then ultimately that clan ends up coming back to the cats. So that's like another whole thing about maybe not exiling, not kicking people out, maybe not segregation. Like that's a whole nother thing that, again, I forgot to write down here, but as I'm talking about it, I'm like remembering this information. And that's like really an insane storyline. But they have like the moss pool, like they have their own spot where they can connect to StarClan. So it's like no matter where you are, like there is a way to connect with your like kind of the spirits. And for the tribe of Rushing Water, who are the cats in the mountains, they don't believe in StarClan. They have like a different kind of religious spirit system who they are aware of, like they're seen as real, which I also really love. StarClan is like, we don't have jurisdiction over that. That's like a different cat territory. And I really like that acknowledgement. Like that's not like they're saying that the tribe has like fake ideas of who like gods, of who people are. It's seen as like, no, the tribe, they have their own religion that is to be respected, and they can communicate in a certain kind of like crystallite pool where there's like a lot of cool spiky rocks. I also realized I didn't address the name system. I've just been like popping off with a couple things. When a cat's born, their name is something Kit. For example, Cloud Kit. Then when they become an apprentice, when they're 6 moons old, they become Paw, Cloud Paw. after they're done with their training and they prove they're ready to be a warrior, they become Cloud, Tail, or Bracken for whatever. They get like an additional thing to their name. Firefall becomes Fireheart, etc. And then if they become a leader, then they get Star at the end of their name instead. The tribe is much funnier names, I think, because they'll have like one name like Brook, and that stands for Brook where small fish swim. And there's one really funny part where they're like, to me, this implies there'd be a lot of roof of cave, floor of cave, like whatever their mother thinks of first after they're born. But they have kind of, I think, cool names. Like Talon of Swooping Eagle. I love the name Talon of Swooping Eagle. That is iconic behavior, okay? Back to Star Clan religion, etc. Star Clan is the one who has like the code has been given by Star Clan. And we can think of that again as like a 10 Commandments type of idea. They have prophecies that Star Clan gives. Fire will save the clan. Power, like they have various prophecies that come through the, there'll be 3 kin of your kin who hold the star or the power of the stars in their paws. These all come from like Star Clan, but then we ultimately learn that they also come from like beyond Star Clan when we're introduced to Midnight the Badger, who's like on another level, and like she also has access to these prophecies. So it's like really kind of like meta idea of like this universal plan that maybe the different religions are aware of, but they all kind of are part of something much bigger, and like the tribe has their own prophecies, so it's like a whole thing. We also have a really interesting cat, Mothwing, and she is a cat who did believe in Star Clan. She was sort of brought into the clan, River Clan, by Sasha. So her parent is actually Tiger Star when he had been exiled. It's a whole thing. But anyways, she then doesn't believe in Star Clan, but she's still a medicine cat, and she still like is a really good medicine cat and does a lot of stuff for her clan, but she doesn't believe in Star Clan. So Leafpool ends up helping her apprentice like have a communication with Star Clan and how to like relate to them. But Mothwing's a really interesting character because she doesn't believe in Star Clan, but she like wonders if they exist. She wonders, she kind of questions these things, and she also understands and respects that the other cats do believe and it's not a joke to them, and she doesn't think it's a joke either. And I think that's really important because like there are atheists, there are agnostic people that we run into, and it's about like mutual respect, I think, and like we shouldn't hate on other people's beliefs, and they shouldn't hate on our beliefs as long as those beliefs do not involve harming somebody or doing something bad. But if my belief doesn't impact you at all and then their belief doesn't impact me, we shouldn't be upset about it. We should just be like, okay, it's fine. We have different beliefs, but we all believe in doing good and helping out our, family, our neighbors, our community, etc. And that's what Mothwing represents. My next note here is about like the deadbeat parents, but I already talked about the deadbeat moment with Spiderleg. We do also have like loss of children. Multiple cats have to give up their kids for various reasons, whether maybe they're going to parent another clan, maybe they've been killed. Those are really sad moments. And like, I think I kind of already talked about that, but it's just, again, like they're highlighting like children, loss of children. And in a sort of not exactly the same vein, but we also have adoption, where Cloud Kit is kind of adopted into ThunderClan. He leaves his mother. He's aware of his mother, like they kind of talk sometimes, which I think is nice, showing that like he has a relationship with his birth mother, but he also has a relationship with like the mother who kind of takes him in and nurses him and his new family. And I really love that dynamic. And we also have, adoption where it's more unknown. Leafpool is the actual mother of Jayfeather, Hollyleaf, and Lionblaze with Crowfeather, but because she's a medicine cat and they're from different clans, she actually doesn't tell Crowfeather, and they have a whole thing, and Leafpool and Squirrelflight pretend that they're Squirrelflight's kits with Bramblestar ultimately, and they don't actually even tell Bramblestar or Brambleclaw at the time, and then also Squirrelflight becomes Squirrelstar, but for most of the time I feel like in my heart it's Brambleclaw, Squirrelflight. So anyways, whatever. So that's adoption there, and saying that I love you just as much, like for once I couldn't have loved you more, like you were my children. And I think that's, again, like just these really powerful moments of family and how like you can still love somebody. It doesn't necessarily matter if you have like an explicit blood relationship or title. Like care and love don't have boundaries like that. They don't have borders that way. And it's just like really, really beautiful. The next note like really takes a pivot because we go from like what I think is beautiful children and love to eugenics, which I would say is kind of Warriors. I would say it's kind of like their Holocaust moment, where we have Tiger Star who becomes like obsessed with pure blood cats, which is really interesting because he has children who are not pure clan cats. Tiger Star is an interesting guy. He's evil, but he has kits who, when they were first born, they were all ThunderClan cats, and then he ends up being kicked out. When he comes back, he's a Shadow Clan cat. But he also had children with Sasha, the rogue, who is, or loner, depending on how you want to think about it. And those cats are obviously not pure clan cats, but he still believes in that. And I think you can kind of think of that as like Hitler and the Aryan race moment. And they make like a bone pile where they like make cats fight. And to me, this kind of represents the shoe pile and stuff like that. And like if they're not worthy, they're killed. If you're like a half clan cat, and this goes back to maybe those like interracial vibes of like, well, you're not welcome here. Like, you're not pure blood. You're not a pure blood, or you're not like the right religion. You're not right for us, so you must die. And that's like Stonefur is killed that way. He's trying to protect Featherpaw and Stormpaw, who are actually Graystrip and Slowstream's kids at this time, and they end up like they get rescued, and Mistyfoot gets rescued, but like Stonefur, he's killed, and he's killed in this like horrible way of like being from Tiger Star, who then like also convinces Leopard Star that this is the right way, and some other kind of like psycho cats. But most of the cats in River Clan and Shadow Clan who are like kind of brought into this, they're not necessarily fans of what's going on, but they're afraid. And they're afraid to stand up because they don't want to be killed next. And I think this really goes to like kind of the bystander effect, and like again with the Holocaust, like maybe people argue about what was known or what was not known, but there's this idea of like, well, if I help, I'll be next. What we should take from real life and also from like the Warrior Cat series is like, we just still need to stick up for other people. We need to stick up for those who are being persecuted and those who are being attacked, because it's the right thing to do, even if it could put us in harm's way. Like, we need to help, we need to fight back. And I think that's like a really, really insane thing to really put in a kid's book, especially that was in like the first set of the books. Like this is the prequel series, right? But this is like that series. That all happens in this series. And I think honestly that's the darkest thing that happens in the whole series ever. I don't think they really repeat that level of hatred. They get kind of more crazy with like the Star Clan Dark Forest lore later on, when they have Ashfur like kind of takes over Bramblesar's body because he's like jealous. And then they have also the whole thing where they start training the Dark Forest cat, like the Dark Forest cats start training the cats in real life who are still alive to kind of fight back. And that's like a big battle. And that is darker in a different way of like preying on people's vulnerabilities and fears, which I think is more reflective. Obviously like that takes place much later in the series. And I think that can be more reflective to maybe even like the MAGA movement, or people saying like, oh, life is really tough. Like, we need to find someone to blame, and scapegoating, which is also really dark and painful. And a lot of cats do die or get like kind of brainwashed in this way. But the thing that to me is so like scary and dark about the Bone Hill and Tiger Star and like these deaths, and they're like trapped in this bone kind of prison because they're half clan, they're not worthy, is that there's not really any more mystical, magical lore going on. Like, they're all a lot like Tiger Star fully alive. Like, the cats who are in control of this, him and like Darkstripe, they're not dead. Like, they don't have any like mystical powers to get into cats' dreams and pervade their fears. They don't have the ability to like go into someone else's body and take over. Like, that's really dark in another way. But like, this is all cats who are just like fully alive, using resources that basically any cat could use if they're charismatic and twisted enough. And I think that's like the really hard-hitting point of like the Bone Hill, which again, as I said a few minutes ago, I'll say again, I think is the most intense, dark thing that the Warrior Cat series includes. To try to pivot out of the Bone Hill, which is really serious, I would say there's also a general theme over doing the right thing, not the easy thing. And this can be seen as like Firestar leaving ThunderClan for a time to go save SkyClan and bring them back, because he knows it's the right thing to do, even though it puts ThunderClan sort of in a weaker spot, and it's complicated, and he doesn't know if he'll return. He ends up losing a life in a rat battle, so he really does contribute a lot to bringing SkyClan back, but it's the right thing to do. We have like a more darker tint of the right thing to do, where Yellowfang ends up killing Broken Star by poison. He's her son, technically. She was supposed to have a son, Madison Cat thing. but he's very evil. He's psychotic. His father, Ragged Star, didn't notice until it was too late, and Broken Star is wreaking havoc, and he needs to be eliminated. There's some discussion to be had there if that was really the right thing to do or not, but it felt like at the time that was like the best option. So there's just like really some interesting things to discuss there, or like when is lying or lying by omission? When do you have to kind of go against general expectations to make a difference and do the right thing? And again, I just think these are really powerful like sentiments to be reading about kids.
I also wanted to just interject that another serious topic that is brought up is the topic of suicide, mostly with Hollyleaf, when for a time the cats believed that she went into the tunnels and they collapsed on her, and she knew they were going to collapse on her. So they thought she was killing herself because she couldn't stand to be kind of half clan, have her whole code that she based her whole life around be a lie. That was something that was brought up. She ended up not having done that. She just did a bit of self-exiling for a time, but that was a topic that was brought up. And I know I just said that, but I also want to reiterate that there are lots of really, really good things that happen in these books. I just was thinking about the list of topics that are difficult or could be more difficult for children to understand when you use people examples, and how the Warrior Cat series kind of makes that easier for children to understand and young teenagers, etc. But there are lots of really great things, a lot of friendship, camaraderie, understanding that you need to apologize sometimes, coming together, self-growth, lots of really good stuff, okay? I just want to reiterate, there's lots of really good things that happen in these series, okay? We're not all just depressed reading them. There's lots of happiness as well.
To try to end this list on like a more positive note, I do also think a major lesson and point that is brought up time and time again in the Warrior Cat series is that we need to fight together. We need to stick together. We need to move forward together. Like, we need to be united for success. And a lot of these things are across the clans. So when they have to move and go to find a new home, the prophecy brings cats from all the clans. Whenever there's like a big issue and we need to unite, like against Tiger Star, River Clan initially is sort of lumped in with Shadow Clan, Wind Clan and Thunder Clan come together, and then like they get the other cats to, like River Clan ends up standing up against Tiger Star also. So it's like we have to come together. We have to stick with maybe the loners, like Barley, the barn cat, like he sticks with the clan sometimes. We have to accept help and aid from other people in the series, obviously other cats, and we can like stand together. We'll be strong, unity for success. Again, I really think that's like a really powerful thing. Teamwork, collaboration, finding commonalities versus differences. Like again, even with the Warrior Cats, right? Like they may have different clans, but they all follow the same code. And so like they have the same ultimate values. It just like up here is a little different. So every now and then they have to like return to those core values to like save the day, make a difference, and move forward. I just think it's like, so powerful. I've been talking for a hot minute, but again, if there's more things that are, you know, maybe more service level items that they're really about like a deep thing going on that I didn't say in the Warrior Cats, because there's literally so much. Like as you say stuff, you just start like thinking about all the insane things that happen. I mean, there's like sister drama between like Ivypool and Dovewing, and you know, and even with like Snowfur and Bluefur, like there's all these like relationships and loss and struggle, and like women getting overlooked sometimes, like with Blue Star, like really having to advocate to become deputy and then leader. There's so much that we could talk about, but honestly, my voice is getting a little tired, and I don't know how much longer, you know, I could retain anyone's interest if they're even still watching now, but again, if you want like a crazy chronological mega deep dive with this kind of content and a whole chronological saga, let me know. And if I get enough interest, again, I will make it for you guys, but it has to be love and trust, because like this is crazy enough. The honest to God truth for me is like I could not imagine my life without the Warrior Cat series. I could not imagine my life without Firestar, my love, my one true icon. Jayfeather and Brambleclaw are also like two of my kings, but like Firestar, I mean, number one, right? Like I could not imagine like growing up without having his impact on my life, even though he's a cat. Like it does not matter, okay? Because he's such a good character. I'm so grateful for the books. I'm so grateful for the series. I know Erin Hunter sometimes makes continuity mistakes, which annoy me, but like that's not the point. The point is like how beautiful and raw and real the stories are, and how they connect on such a deep, beautiful level. Like I literally could, I love them so much. It's crazy. And if you haven't read the books and you somehow want to, even though I did a lot of spoiling for you guys, like you You really should. You should read them. You should fall in love with Firestar as well and his amazing journey and how he will continue to sacrifice himself over and over again for the right thing to do, because that is who he is, okay? Fire will save the clan, fire will save the code, fire will save everything, okay? Because he is a beast. Rawr. Read these books. Watch cats fall in love and have battles and have prophecies and trauma and ultimately like friendship and power and moving forward together, because it's amazing. And if you don't love the Warrior Cat series or have no clue but you just listen to this for whatever, I hope there is a book or a book series that you love that gives you this some kind of passion and fervor, because we all deserve to have like a beautiful world that we can escape to and like use as like life lessons for our own life, because it's just like power of art and books and reading and amazingness. So go out there, do great things. And by those great things, I mean like the video if you liked it. If you made it this far, you better like it. Comment down below whatever your thoughts are. If I missed something, if you want me to do a mega deep dive, whatever. And don't forget to subscribe for more maybe not cat related videos, but other important, essential topics, of course. And I will see you next time. Bye.